Hey everyone, Mr. Happy here, and welcome to my guide to the Arcadion's light heavyweight first match on the Savage difficulty. Now keep in mind this video is being made week 1 of release, and strategies will largely reflect personal experiences, minus a few things that I want to throw in there. Use it as an opportunity to learn, visualize, and gain insight into the fight, and for strategies to potentially change as the team spend more and more time ironing things out. Before pulling the boss, I recommend deciding clock spots for your team. The standard of tanks north and south, healers east and west, and D1 through 4 in their usual intercardinal positions works perfectly fine. You'll also want light parties and DPS support pairs set up as per usual. We like doing color pairs for this, effectively pairing up the DPS and support on matching color markers like A1, B2, etc. But that's up to you. At the start of the fight, Black Cat will open with Quadruple Crossing. This attack fires 2 sets of 4 conal AoEs at the 4 nearest players in each set, dealing high damage and granting any player hit a slashing vulnerability up debuff. We had the DPS all step into the hitbox and bait the first 4 hits, and then the support step in while the DPS step out to take the second. Admittedly, after looking back on our footage, we probably should have done it the other way. Tanks healers in first and then DPS in second, and that'll make sense a little bit later in the video. After firing the first 2 sets of conals, she will then fire follow-up conals in the same spots in the same order. So the 4 DPS rotate clockwise to dodge first, and then you dodge back to the intercardinal for the 4th hit. You can also do tanks healers in first if you want on the cardinals, it's up to you. You usually do this during 2s, so casters shouldn't have any issues, they should have plenty of instant casts. After that is Biscuit Maker. It's the same tank buster as normal, but this time you are going to want to mid it, and you're going to want to tank swap, or just tank and vuln, though we'll touch upon that a bit more later. Then Black Cat will jump middle and begin casting 9 lives. This attack causes Black Cat to project her next attack onto a Soul Shade clone that she will spawn later. When the clones are eventually tethered and activated, they will copy the exact order of operations that she did. The first 9 lives has Black Cat do a 1-2 paw, so just dodge left and right according to her paw order. This will then be projected onto 2 different clones at the same time, who after being tethered will do the same 1-2 paw. This leaves a 1/8 of the room pizza slice safe spot for the 2 back-to-back hits. Fortunately, the second safe spot is always directly opposite of the first, so find safe spot number 1 and cross through when the paws go off. While 9 lives number 1 is resolving, Black Cat will prepare 9 lives number 2. This one will cast either double or quadruple swipe. Double swipe targets both healers with a light party stack, and quadruple swipe targets either all 4 DPS or all 4 support with a pair stack. For double swipe, we just agreed to go to the BD marker for light parties 1 and 2 respectively after the paws were done, while for pairs we went to 1, 2, 3, and 4 based on our color pair spots. You could also just do a lineup inside of this pizza slice. You could just have group 1 near, group 2 far. There's lots of ways you could solve it, but we just made it consistent for this. Once Black Cat summons a Soul Shade to remember the swipe, she'll do a leaping Quadruple Crossing. This is the same as the original, but much like normal, she'll leap to the marker on the ground. So get set up for the little in-out dance on the marker and not on the boss. The only difference is remembering to do the double or quadruple strike at the end. For double, we had parties meet at northwest and southeast, and for pairs, everyone just dodges into their color pair spot relative to the boss's position. Now, like I said earlier, if we had done tanks and healers in first and DPS in second, then we could have used the left and right side of the boss's hitboxes respectively, similar to the DB marker. So that's probably the smarter thing to do looking back on my own footage. Funny how guides make you do this sometimes. Speaking of relative, I am a much bigger fan of boss relative quadruple crossings. The boss is going to turn and face different directions constantly throughout the fight, and while you're going to be tracking them or the clones, I just think it's easier to do boss relative than True North. So that is my recommendation to get that out of the way. After a bloody scratch raid wide, Black Cat will jump middle and prepare Mouser. This version compared to normal will destroy far more tiles, leaving only 4 damaged tiles in total at the end. I recommend standing on the inner 4 tiles and looking at the southeast and northwest ones. If those only get hit once, move on to them after they're hit and stay there until Mouser is done. If they get hit twice, move on to them after the first hit and then move back to the other tile afterwards to avoid falling off. Black Cat will then fill in 4 tiles after this resolves, or technically Matem does, but that's not that important, creating a rectangle that's either long north to south or west to east. Black Cat will then summon a copycat clone, which will perform a similar charge attack to the players as normal. You know, the one that stuns you and knocks you up into the air. Any player with the paw marker will be assaulted, and it will either be all 4 DPS or all 4 supports in sequence. Now, there are a few changes from normal. Black Cat will no longer dash from her location to the player. She'll instead teleport to them to perform the attack, so the copycat clone's location is irrelevant. Her initial strike of the player also sends a plus-shaped shockwave outward, knocking any player hit off the arena, so you don't want to be in line with the hit player at any point. Finally, she also has 2 different attacks here instead of just the one she did in normal. When she's leaning down and forward, she'll do the knockback version from normal, where the player is sent back about 1 square's worth of distance. If she raises her arm up behind her, she'll just slam the player down on the square they're standing on. If you get the slam down, it just means you need to position on the unbroken tiles immediately. However, for the knockback, she'll actually teleport behind you and knock you in the direction you're facing. So be extra careful to aim your character towards the correct tile and not to turn to get that one last GCD you thought you could get, or this may happen.
Oh, I'm barking you guys, sorry. Run. Oh no! I did a GCD, that's my bad. Fuck.
As for how to assign who gets what tiles, we actually opted into the all one side strategy, as our group called it. We basically ensured that regardless of who was selected and what slam they got, that all cross AoEs came from one side of the room. This just eliminates the party needing to constantly shuffle around for people as they get knocked around, and that's what was happening when we were trying to do melee get close squares and range get far squares. It just wasn't worth all the hassle. Given there's 2 knockbacks and 2 slams, this means that both slams took tiles on the designated cross side, so away from the party side, and both knockbacks aimed for the safe tiles on the safe side. It was just nice to basically stand still as the party throughout the entire thing, really only having to potentially shift over a single time, and hopefully your eyes are good enough to see that. After this is a biscuit maker into a massive shockwave knockback. Unlike normal, this knockback cannot be mitigated, and unfortunately, going directly north or south will get you killed. You'll have to quickly take notice of the arena being reformed in opposing corners, so either northwest and southeast or northeast and southwest. We had Group 1 go to whichever north side platforms were being reformed, and Group 2 to the south ones. Once you're knocked back, players will actually be targeted with a spread AoE as well, so just make sure you're not on top of anyone else and you're all good. Black Cat will quickly go into her second 9 lives phase upon everything returning to normal. The first one here will copy a leaping 1-2 paw. While this is nothing fancy, it's worth noting that the clone also copies the leap relative to the direction Black Cat is facing. So if Black Cat is jumping to her left, the clone will also jump to its left. Otherwise, leaping 1-2 paw isn't a big deal. After summoning a clone, the second 9 lives will be a leaping Quadruple Crossing. Again, remember the leap is relative to the direction that she is jumping. If she jumps right, the clone will jump right later. But again, just do the Quadruple Crossing like normal, with the leap. Once these are copied and cloned, I recommend dragging Black Cat to whichever spot the clones will be performing their mechanics from. During the clones leaping 1-2, Black Cat will also do Tempestuous Tear, a split damage line AoE on each healer. Get in light parties and line up in front and back of her. When the leap happens, the AoE will fire and then you cross over to the other side. After this, reposition her to the second spot for the leaping Quadruple Crossing. Remember, the crossing is coming from the clone, not from the boss, which jumps exactly 1 square's distance to the leaping side. During this Quadruple Crossing, Black Cat will place 2 sets of Nail Chipper AoEs on the party that deal magic damage and a small AoE and grant magic vulnerability up. We adjust who does the Quadruple Crossing bait first relative to who doesn't get the marker. So if supports get Nail Chipper, then the DPS bait first, or vice versa, and you have plenty of time to take notice of this. While there is a second set of Nail Chippers for the other role later, there are basically no issues with that one because the magic vuln doesn't last very long, it won't kill a support or a DPS if they got hit by the first one, and you're just dodging avoidable attacks at this point. So just do them and dodge everything. After this is another bloody scratch before Mouser 2. The tile breaking works the same way, so just do that again. Now the copycat will again appear and perform the slams and knockbacks, but with a small twist. Now the boss will also do one of two attacks alongside each of these hits. Overshadow is the split damage AoE from normal, so stack and mitt the remaining 7 players that are not part of the knockback. And Splintering Nails is a new attack, which performs 3 conals on the party. One will target a tank, one a healer, and one a DPS. So just have any player that isn't doing the slams huddled up within their role. We did tanks on the left side of the tile looking at the boss, healers dead center, and DPS on the right, as you can see on the screen right now. Otherwise, the strategy of keeping the knockbacks and slams on the other side really helps minimize movement here. You still likely are going to have to swap over once, or we had an error and had to do a full 180 degrees around the boss, but so long as players are paying attention, it's not so bad. The rest of the phase plays out exactly the same as the first Mouser, with the tank buster into knockback plus spread. I highly advise you do not tank invuln this tank buster. You'll want both of them available, and you'll understand why very soon. Right after Mouser 2 comes Raining Cats. With high DPS, you'll probably skip this outright, but it's fortunately not too bad to just do either. This attack will fire 4 back-to-back conal AoEs at each tethered player, giving them a slashing vulnerability at the same time. You can pass the tether by stepping in front of a player that currently has it. At the same time, 2 split damage AoEs will go out, one on the nearest player and one on the furthest. The idea seems to be to have each tethered player as neither the nearest or farthest, while the party breaks up into 2 different near and far groups to bait each of them. Then the teams one by one rotate in, do like an HTMR or something like that. You know, it's a pretty standard mechanic, easy to identify. But you know what you could also do? Absolutely none of that. You know, it turns out that tank invulns work on both the tethers and the split damage AoEs. Heck, a tank using super cooldowns can survive at least a single set of them together. So on the first set, put the tanks in close and the healers in range out of max melee a bit to bait the first set of AoEs, while the melee do the first set of tethers. Then, after the melee tethers go off, have the tanks pop a bunch of cooldowns and take both the tethers. The tank should subsequently ensure that they are the closest and furthest players respectively, and have them eat both the cleave and the stack marker. Unmitigated, the stack marker does about 180 to 190,000 damage on me as a DPS. So once tank mids and stats are all plugged in, even between that and the tether, they survive with a very healthy amount of, well, health. Then they just stand still and press their tank invulns for sets 3 and 4. The party can stand directly on the boss attack ring during this, preferably on like the back left or back right of the boss for melee positionals. The tanks can then have one of them step into the hitbox and the other one at max melee on the opposite side, as you see in this diagram. This eliminates all the moving alongside of all of the healing and pretty much the entire mechanic as a whole after that first hit. There's also a ton of other ways you can do this to eliminate some of the more finicky factors. Obviously, trying to make sure the tanks are nearest and farthest can be a little bit of a hassle, even if it does make for the easiest overall outcome in the end. But you could just have both the tanks do the near one and the rest of the party do the far one if you really want to eliminate that problem. Like, there's so many little things you can do. So I don't know what the PF is going to land on exactly, if the way they're doing it now is going to continue to be that way. But some variation of the tank invuln strat is almost always going to happen here. And again, you can skip this week 1 if you have a near flawless performance up till that point. When people have tome gear, raid gear, savage weapons, you're not going to see this mechanic anymore. After this, Black Cat will do Copycat plus Predacious Pounce. While it's very similar to the normal mode version, Black Cat will perform 1-2 paw mid pounce pattern. Fortunately, there are some very easy movements. Much like normal, there's a safe spot next to the Copycat, except in this one, it's safe for all except the very final pounce. But there's also a middle pounce that precedes it by 2 moves. So start in the empty section and then step into the middle of the room once that pounce AoE disappears, and then you're free to dodge either left or right first, pretty much without any trouble. I'd advise you only barely cross the center line, as the final pounce will clip you as it travels if you go too far. Once this attack finishes, Black Cat will begin casting Mouser a 3rd time. However, this pattern completely destroys the arena, eliminating your entire team. So one final push here for the clear, and in total you have 10 minutes to get it done. And that's going to be a wrap for my guide to Arcadion Light Heavyweight Match 1 on the Savage difficulty against Black Hat. I think it's the longest intro and outro I've had to do for any Savage fight. Thank you for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe and stay tuned for my guides on fights 2, 3, and 4. With that, I'll see you in the next one. Take care.